Hello, welcome to a new video, and in this video I want us to look at our graphing calculator. This is intended for people who are not familiar with their graphing calculator and want an idea of some tips and tricks and where to find things and all that jazz. So this should be helpful if you have any kind of TI-84 plus or TI-83 plus from back in the day, but if you have a TI Inspire or a TI-89 or a Casio, probably not going to be as helpful a video as you might like. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, I've got what's called an emulator on my computer here that I'm going to be using, that it should look exactly the same as if, or pretty similar to if you bought a TI-84 plus. And so you should be able to see my mouse cursor, and I'll try to make it so that it shows when I'm clicking. We've got a big screen that I think my face is probably in front of, that shows what is happening on the calculator, and then we've also got these little screens that will show us what is in a couple different places, which will be handy here in a second. But if you want to grab your calculator and follow along with some of the stuff we do, that might be super helpful. So step number one is to turn on the calculator if you haven't already. So this calculator is on and cannot apparently be turned off. You can see that the button that I've pressed most recently is red, which is nice. So turn on your calculator using the on button. One of the things that you want to familiarize yourself with pretty quickly is that this is the main screen right now, and this is the screen where we do just our normal math, like when we need to add, subtract, multiply, divide, all that. And look for those buttons now. We've got the number buttons here, down at the bottom middle, decimal down at the bottom middle. We've got a negative inside of a parentheses next to the decimal. That's going to be important. Then on the right side here, we've got divide, multiply, minus, plus, and enter, which would be like whenever we need to know the answer. One of the most important things about using a calculator like this is that while you may think a negative sign down at the bottom here and the minus sign should be interchangeable, your calculator does not. So for whatever reason with the programming inside of it, there is a difference. So if you are trying to write -2 plus 5, if you write -2, look at what happens. Something that is not what we wanted. So if you're trying to write a -2 just by itself or at the beginning, you have to use this negative button and then 2. Then we can do plus and 5 and press enter, and it says, oh, that's 3. That's the answer. If we want to use subtraction, that's fine. If I want to do -2 minus 5, then yes, I do use that minus button on the right side. And if you're looking really carefully here on your screen, the calculator actually makes the negative and the minus sign look slightly different. This -2, the negative's a little bit above and kind of shorter, and so then we press enter. Let me explain what happened when I did press the minus sign at the beginning. So one of the really cool things about a calculator like this, or really any graphing calculator I would assume does this, is that we can take the answers we've already gotten and we can use them. So if I'm like, okay, I'm working this problem, I've got the answer -7, I'm going to take that answer and do something to it. If I just do one of these buttons, like multiply, it says ANS and then the multiplication symbol. ANS is short for answer, and so it's saying, I'm going to take your last answer that you got, I'm going to multiply it by whatever it is you tell me to do. So in this case, it should do -7 times 6, and press enter, and we get -42. So that's a really cool thing we can do. And so just know that if you are wanting to work through something like kind of step by step, you can just keep reusing the answer. The other cool thing that we can do is we can scroll up and actually grab things. So let's say that we typed in a really long problem. I'm just gonna make up a bunch of stuff for it to do. Okay, so here's my really long problem. I got an answer, but oh, that 8 was really supposed to be a 7. Instead of retyping the whole thing, what I can do is I can scroll up with this button until I've highlighted what I want to pick again, and then I press enter and it puts that back into a line that is editable. I don't know if that's a real word, editable, but, and then I can use my scroll arrows here to go to the thing I want to change. Now here's a thing that can be frustrating. Whenever you do go back and forth like this and you're like, okay, I want to change this 8 to a 7, that's no big deal. You put the blinking cursor over the 8, you press 7, it changes it, no big deal. But what if instead we needed to put 17? If I try to put in 17, it's just going to write over what I have. So there's another button we need to press if what we're wanting to do is insert in an extra number here. Because basically, the way it is right now, if I want to change this to a 17 into a 7, I need everything to shift over so that I can put a 1 in front of the 7. So what I do is I press second and this button that says DEL. If I don't press the second button, this button right here just deletes what I have. DEL stands for delete. But if I press second, then I get to do whatever's in blue up above it. So if I press second and delete, it's going to, you can look and see how the cursor looks different now. Now it's going to actually hopefully put the 1 in front of the 7. Ta-da! So now it's a 17. Okay, so if I wanted to go back and say, okay, well, I didn't actually want that. I really just want the 7 there. That's what the delete button is for. Very important. We have a clear button, we have a delete button. If you're wanting to get rid of everything that you've just typed, press the clear button. If you're wanting to get rid of just the thing your cursor is on top of, press the delete button. And it may take you quite a few times of clearing out the whole thing before you get the hang of remembering, okay, I want to delete this one, so I'm going to press the delete button. DEL stands for delete. Second delete, let's me insert. But if I want to clear this whole thing, like if I don't want this anymore, I press clear and the whole thing goes away. What else do we need to think about? How about the fact that this 39.33 repeating seems like it would make a good fraction, and it actually is one that I could probably figure out in my head on my own, but this is a calculator, so why don't we let the calculator do it for us? I hope this works, what I'm about to do. I'm going to press enter so that it grabs my answer. That's another way that you can do it. You can use the answer button, or you can actually just grab the answer and then work with it like what I just did. There's a really cool menu here on the left called the math menu, and you might be thinking, is it everything I'm doing math? I don't know who named this menu, but they named it math. And one of the best parts of the math menu is actually the first option. Go ahead and take a look at some of these other options if you would like to. We have basically an arrow fraction, arrow decimal. Number 3 is supposed to be a cube, so if you're raising something to the 3rd power. If you're squaring something, that is not in the menu. You have a squared button left side middle over here if you need to square something. The 4th one is for a cube root. And then the 5th one is for if you need any other root, and we'll go through and do some of those. And there's a lot more in here, but those are just some of the things that if you are like, I should be able to do this on a calculator, but I don't see it, checking the math menu is a pretty good idea. So what I'm wanting to do is change that 39.3 repeating into a fraction. So I'm going to press enter so that it does number 1, or you can press number 1 and it will do that. So my hope here is that it's going to change that decimal into a fraction. And voila, that is 118 over 3, which is an improper fraction. I don't actually know if there's a way to get it to change it to a mixed number or not, because that's not something we normally need when we're kind of at the point where we were using a graphing calculator like Algebra 2 and above. So if you need a fraction, that's how we can get a fraction. The other thing that is really cool about TI-83 plus, TI-84 plus, anything with a plus, is that we can make really nice looking fractions. So back in my day, we had to put parentheses around what we were doing and use the division symbol so that we'd have a fraction, right? This would be having 9 plus 6 on top divided by 2 gives us a decimal. I could change that decimal to a fraction. But there is a really cool way we can do that with our graphing calculator. If you see this alpha button in green, so to kind of step back for a second, the second button lets us do whatever is in blue on these buttons, or whatever color your second button is, that's what you're looking for. So when I press second, it lets me do whatever is written above in blue. When I press alpha, it's going to do the things that are in green. And alpha is actually, originally it was so that you could type things, so you can type messages and things like that. Or that's probably not their intention, was for you to type messages. You can program on the calculator, so that was probably more what they had in mind. But the alpha button, you can actually like type stuff in. But up here, in green, we have F1, F2, F3, F4, F5. And so these, if I press alpha and then press F1 here, which is also, it also says Y equals there, it's going to bring up a really nice menu. This menu helps us to put in fractions that look like fractions. So this first one says n over d, that's numerator over denominator. If I press enter, check this out. I've got a numerator and a denominator that I just need to fill in. So I'd put 9 plus 6 on top, and I'd put 2 on bottom, and it tells me, because I put it in as a fraction, it tells me my answer as a fraction, 15 over 2. Now, if you do that on your calculator and it still gives you a decimal, and you've done everything the same way I did, then that's a mode thing. So the other important thing we can do here is go to our mode and kind of learn what the different things are. I have no idea why you would want to change from math print to classic. Math print is going to make things look more like math, like the fraction looking like a fraction, an exponent looking like an exponent, things like that. Whereas classic, you'll be stuck with things that look less nice. So I don't know why you would do that. We got normal, scientific, and English. I have no idea what that last one is. I've never used it, but the difference between normal and scientific is where you do like 2 times 10 to the 5th power or things like that. So at some point, while you have your graphing calculator, you will probably at some point need scientific notation, and so that's where you'd find it. This float with the numbers next to it is an interesting one. So this is it rounding to a certain decimal place. So whenever it says float, it basically means I'm not going to round. As that's your calculator saying that. Float means I'm not going to round. I'm just going to give you the whole decimal until it stops. Or if it doesn't stop, I give you as many decimals as I can. If I were to select 0, it would round to no decimal. So it would round to the nearest whole number. If I pick 1, it'll round to the nearest 10th, 2 to the nearest 100th, and so on. I recommend you leave it on float in general because you should be able to round to things. That being said, if you're like, I don't know what, I need to round this to 2 decimal places and I don't know what it would be, you can always change it to round to 2 decimal places for you. Or if consistently your math class or science class is asking you to round to a certain number of decimal places, here's a place where you can change it. So that's float. Something that will be important to you at some point in your life is radian and degree mode. So if you are using sine, cosine, or tangent, or trig functions, and you are trying to find like sine of 45 degrees, your calculator needs to be in degree mode to get the right answer. If you are just now starting to have a graphing calculator, you may not even know what radians are, and that's fine, but it's another way that we name angles, and so there will be a point where you might be asked to find sine of something that's in radians, and so you'd want to make sure that you're in radian mode. This next one, we want to be in function mode. These other ones you are not likely to use until, like, you may use it in pre-calculus, or you might not use it until calculus, or you might not ever encounter parametric or polar things at all, depending on how much math you end up doing. This next one, thick, dot thick, thin, and dot thin, I'm guessing that this has to do with when we graph lines, what the lines look like. And I've never changed this setting before, so I don't know what the difference would be exactly. I would assume that we probably want to keep it on thick. Sequential versus simultaneous is also a graphing thing. So if you look at this little box where we've got y1, y2, y3, and all these, you can put in a whole bunch of different equations for it to graph at the same time. But whenever you go from this y equals menu to the graph screen, if it says sequential, it will graph them one at a time. and if you put simultaneous, it graphs them all at the same time. And that can be a useful thing to have, but it really, to me, doesn't, I don't know that it makes a big difference one way or the other, which one you want to pick. Next one down, real or these other two. This has to do with if you are trying to use complex numbers or imaginary numbers. And so for now, you probably do not need to use complex numbers. I don't know that it really does much harm if you do change it to a plus bi, but it also isn't super helpful. So if you were to do square root of -4 on your calculator, let me actually do that real quick. So the square root button, you have to press second and then this x squared button. So square root of -4. If you are in real mode, then it will tell you, error, you're getting a non-real answer. If I switched my mode to a plus bi, it should actually tell me that that answer is an imaginary number, and it should tell me the correct imaginary answer. But real quick, when you get an error, this is what it looks like. Oh, it even had, I feel like this is more helpful than it used to be. In real mode, all calculations must result in a real number. So it's even telling you that maybe your issue is what mode you're in, that you're in real mode, and so you've tried to get a non-real answer in real mode. Those don't mix, sorry. So when you do get an error, most if not all of the time, it gives you two options, quit or go to. And so if you quit, it's just going to basically put you at a new line. If you press go to, it's going to attempt to show you where the issue is. So I think a lot of people just naturally quit out of the error, and that's fine, but especially whenever there's syntax errors, one of the common errors you can get is error. It says syntax. I'll make one of those happen too. And if it is a syntax error and you press go to, it will likely show you about where that syntax error is. So I'm going to go to, well, that was not as helpful as I was hoping it would be. I was hoping it would highlight this negative right here, but I guess it was saying, hey, you're trying to square root. So if I want to make this something I can actually find, I delete the negative and press enter. The square root of 4 is 2. So I want to show you a syntax error real quick. So let's say we do -3, and we're trying to do -5. I think this will give me an error. -3 minus 5, but I pressed the negative button twice. So here my error says syntax. So syntax is a fancy word for press plus on menu item for catalog help. Interesting. Syntax is a word for the order in which we do things. The English language has syntax, or any language in general has syntax, where we put words in a certain order so that they make sense. Programming has syntax, so things like having to put parentheses around something or things like that. So the issue on this one was that I'm not allowed to use the negative sign like a minus sign. So if I click go to, it actually does correctly highlight where my issue is, so I can go, oh, that's not supposed to be a negative, that's supposed to be a minus sign, and I can change it and get the right answer. So that was a distraction from my mode being in real mode. So what else we have here? Full horizontal graph table. This changes what your graph setup looks like, that you actually can, I don't know what horizontal does. It makes it so that, well, I didn't know this was a thing. This is really handy. It makes it so your graph is up here at the top, but then you can do math down here at the bottom. That seems helpful. I wonder if you can edit the graph though, or interact with the graph. Hang on, let's graph. So if you want to graph something, you go to y equals. So if I wanted to graph a line, for instance, I have to press the graph button here on the right side. So here is my line. If I want to get out of y equals and get back to the normal screen, I have to do the quit button, which is second mode. And then there's a lot of cool things we can do with this graph. that I think I will need to do a separate video on, because I could go on and on about that as well. We were focused on our mode though, so that's what horizontal does, is it lets you see both of those. If you're not graphing a bunch, then I don't know that you need it to be horizontal, or if you're not like I feel like you'll know if that's something that would be helpful. Like if you're ever at a point where you're graphing something but you wish that you could also add, subtract, multiply, divide, that's where horizontal would be helpful. What I think is potentially more helpful is this graph dash table, because what it does is when you press graph, it has the graph and a table next to it. Because I do know that there have been many times while doing a problem where I've had to like switch back and forth between the graph and the table trying to get the information I wanted, and so here it all is in the same spot. So that does seem helpful to me, and if I get out of here, it doesn't affect the normal screen, which is nice. So that I can see as a helpful mode. Okay, the reason I came in here though is our fraction type. I wonder if the second one here gives us mixed numbers. I'm ending up accidentally like discovering new things as I go through this. What I wanted to show was that answers down here, auto, decimal, fraction, approximation, if you are wanting it to always give you a fraction, you could click or press fraction approximation, and it will always try to give you a fraction no matter how you enter it in. If you're always wanting it to give you a decimal, like maybe you're in science class and you just always need the decimal, then you pick decimal. If you're wanting it to basically base it on how you enter it, that would be auto. So if it's on auto, if you take the time to make it look like a fraction, it will give you your answer as a fraction if it can. If you put it in as a normal division problem, it will give you a decimal. And you can always flip between the two using the math menu, so that's nice. I'm curious about this fraction type, if that means that it will give me a mixed number. So even though the screen is blank, we can still actually scroll up. As long as we haven't cleared our memory or deleted these entries, you actually can delete them by pressing the delete button. But if I wanted to look and see if this will give me a mixed number now, if that's what it's saying, that's what it is. So if for whatever reason you really want mixed numbers instead of improper fractions, that's a mode thing that you can change. So that's great. I think for pre-calculus and above, for sure, improper fractions are more helpful, and quite possibly for algebra 2 and above, improper fractions are more helpful, but maybe not. I do not know what go to second format graph is, so if you know and want to comment on the video to let me know, that's great. And then this is not a video about statistics, and that's what these last two are for, so I'm not going to worry about those either. But that's just kind of, that was a lot of info. So if all you're really needing here at the beginning of your math class is to be able to do, calculations, then play around with this. One of the really cool things about having the calculator is being able to all of a sudden test theories more easily, or check things that you think should be true but you're not sure are true. So I'll be honest, for way too long in my life, I couldn't remember, I wasn't 100% sure whether dividing by 0 was okay or not, and so I would do it on the calculator. Gives me an error because I cannot divide by 0, so 9 divided by 0 is undefined. And if I press go to, it's like, you need something else after this 0 because I can't divide by 0. Whereas if you do 0 divided by 9, it tells you the answer is 0. So that's the case of where you're able to kind of check things that, yeah, you probably should know, but as long as it's better to be confident about it, right? So the other thing is, like, when do I need parentheses for things and when do I not need them? So do I need these parentheses to get the correct answer or not? So this is a good time to play around with things like that. I didn't need those parentheses because if all I have is multiplication and division, it goes from left to right, and the parentheses in that particular location at the beginning didn't actually change anything about the order in which it did it. So that's, I would say, one of the reasons why I have a fairly good math sense is because I would experiment with that. I would usually, the first time I would put, like for a while I just put tons of parentheses in my problems. And then as I got used to using the calculator and got better at math, I started using less parentheses because I would know, okay, I don't need those parentheses there, or that kind of thing. So I think that this is where I'm going to end this video. I do have another video planned to show off some of the graphing stuff specifically. And so if you have any questions that you would like me to go through on the calculator, on how to do that kind of thing, or if you feel like I left something out that would be super important to look at, then please leave a comment. Real quick, if you need a graphing calculator and you haven't bought one already, can I recommend to you this TI-84 color CE? It doesn't say CE on this one, but it's basically the same thing. There is a link down in the description. It's an affiliate link. If you click on it, it will take you to Amazon where you can buy a TI-84 Plus calculator. And if you use that link to do it, then I get something out of it, but you also get something out of it because you get a really cool calculator. So it's kind of a win-win. Just, you know, if that's something you think you're interested in. But it's down there in the description. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.